Hi, welcome to my literary analysis of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Lighting could be better. It's definitely going to rain soon, but let's get started on chapter 1. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. This opening line is one of the most famous. I bet you even people who've never heard of Pride and Prejudice or read it know or are familiar with this line, even if they maybe can't place where they know this line. A lot of people know it, and honestly, I can't think of the opening line of any of Jane Austen's other books or even the Brontes. The only opening line that comes to mind off the top of my head is like, it was best of times, but worst of times, which is Charles Dickens. But like, this captures you because it's so succinct and also outlandish while simultaneously being truthful. So like, even like now and then, people are probably going like, yeah, that makes sense. Like the mothers being like, yes, that is true. They are in want of a wife. Where you have others be very independent, being like, no, I don't want to be married. And it's stating what the intentions of this book is outright, while simultaneously showing like the story isn't all about marriage, as we see, because you sometimes forget about the marriage being such a driving focus of the book, and like so many other important things are going on in the book. But the line continues in the next paragraph of, however little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of some one or other of their daughters. And that, to me, is the true Jane Austen of this quote. So, like, the opening quote is probably what you would hear a mother saying about marriage, but the following paragraph is what Jane Austen would say, which is that they see these men as possessions, as an item to be like own and use, and they will be owned by one of the daughters when they enter the neighborhood or they join up. And it's funny because she's adding this humor, and the thing that she does throughout the rest of the book too is seeing this parallel between men and women. While men might have more agency than women, simultaneously they don't. Simultaneously they're being manipulated and puppeted just as much as women are. That the men are finding themselves in situations that, say, scheming mothers are putting them in or thrusting their daughters in, as you see with Mrs. Bennet and her interactions with Mr. Bingley, often being like, you promised you would have dinner with us. You promised. And even the girls are like, you promised a ball. And it's funny because even though the men have agency to come and go, they're seen as an item of possession or a thing to covet. And at the end of the paragraph, she said, eventually, at some point, they will be owned by one of the daughters of the neighborhood. Like, it's funny. It's like, instead of the daughter being owned by the man, it's like the man being owned by these families who are coveting them. So this opening section is super fascinating to me because I love, like I said, the opening line is catchy and it's stating the intentions of this book, which is about marriage and what you think it's going to be. But the following paragraph is Jane Austen's twist on it, which is that it's not going to be how you think it's going to be. So chapter 1 is predominantly setting up kind of the inciting incident, that there's going to be someone new coming into the neighborhood, but not just anybody new, someone with wealth, someone unmarried supposedly, and that is good for their 5 daughters. But also chapter 1 is setting up the dynamics of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, which their marriage is used to then compare to the potential marriages throughout the rest of the story. Like, one of the reasons why Lizzie wants a marriage of equals is because she sees the interactions between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet and even acknowledges that it's slightly cruel of her father to prod and tease and kind of diminish his wife the way that he does. While he doesn't hate her. He tolerates her, but he finds her silly, and it acknowledges it was her beauty that had first caught his attention to her. Like, he says this later down the line. But I like that they're kind of like, when you're married, you are linked, that you're kind of owned with each other. When, the introduction is, my dear Mr. Bennet said his lady to him one day. But also you see the dynamics of her so excited with news and wants to share it with someone. And she's like, do you not want to know who has taken it? And he says, you want to tell me. And I have no objection to hearing it. And that was invitation enough. And it's showing that, like, he acknowledges it's a performance for the two of them. It's a performance that she wants to share this gossip, and he's letting her make a fool of herself. So he's that kind of person that's like, let's see what you let's see what you do. Let's see how you can entertain me now, because I wouldn't mind some entertainment. And it's the same with Mr. Collins. The way that he treats Mrs. Bennet is kind of the same as he treats Mr. Collins. He finds humor in his silliness. And this just immediate interaction on the first page is showing us their dynamics, by dynamics you might see in everyday life, even today. And it's brilliant because it's so distinct and kind of goes out of the norm at the same time, because you'd think that he'd be like, oh, isn't this exciting? Please tell me more. But he doesn't. She goes, don't you want to know? And he goes, you want to tell me, so I have no problems with listening. So I like the dynamics right here too. And what the two of them say also tell us a lot about their characters and what they find important. For example, when Mrs. Bennet is telling him about how Miss Long said that a young man of large fortune from the north of England, that he came down on Monday in a chaise and four. That, like, the chaise and four, it's silly to Mr. Bennet. He doesn't care, but she cares because it's an indication of potential wealth. But here's the thing that is important to the story too. It's first impressions, it's appearances. You can appear to be wealthier than you are. Just because he has a chaise and four doesn't mean he has an income. He could have wasted all his money on that chaise and four, but to her it seems like this makes sense, because it's not like she can, hire an FBI agent and do a check on his income and IRS taxes and things like that. Not that you should anyway in the first place. I don't know. But it's the little things like that, and that's why she gets so taken away by, for example, Bingley and his chase before. She just got lucky that he actually was wealthy and he actually was genuinely nice. But she does the same thing with Mr. Wickham. He has the outward appearance of being genteel and of class, but then we learn how toxic he is later. But I also love that Mr. Bennet knows where she's going at. He's like, let's just cut to the chase. Is he married or is he single? Mrs. Bennet then follows up of, oh, to be single for sure. Like, of course he would be. I wouldn't be telling you about this man if he wasn't single. And Mr. Bennet knows that too, but he just wanted to cut to the chase and set her up and be like, all right, I know what's happening. I know what you want, but let's see how you're going to perform. And to me, it's so funny because I'm reading a lot of Georgette Harrop books right now, and she's found she was writing between the 1930s to the 1970s, but she's like I consider her a pillar in Regency. I absolutely adoring her. She reminds me a lot of Jane Austen, Frances Burney, but also bridging towards more modern contemporary historical romances. I know it's paradoxical to say that, but she has a lot of characters that are very similar to that. So far I've read I think 5 or 6 of her books, and I've come across a handful of characters that are very clever, very smart, like Mr. Bennet, and they kind of just sit there and go, here's a rope. Let's see how far you can hang yourself. Or, I'm just gonna pick up my glass of whiskey and see what you do today. How can you entertain me? Literally, one of her stories, Frederica, the main character gets bored easily, but the reason why he likes Frederica and her family is because he doesn't seem to be bored. He finds them fascinating and interesting, and that's kind of the same with Mr. Bennet. He's like, I just want to watch the world, but I don't want to be involved in the world really, because that's too much for me. I also like Mr. Bennet saying, how so? How can it affect them? My dear Mr. Bennet, replied his wife, how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them. And I like that he's kind of steadily calling her out, being like, is this the only thing you're thinking about? Which, yes, marriage, but also, is this the only detail that you care about this newcomer? Do you not care about his person, why he might come, about his history, about him as a person? No. She cares more of, is he an eligible suitor to take one of her daughters away? Which, as we later, I love it setting up this is all you care about? Come on, you gotta care about more. She seems vapid for only caring about that, but as the story progresses, we see that it makes sense that this is all she cares about because of the entail, and her husband's not doing anything really that much to secure their life afterwards. She's assuming he's going to die first, and as we see of Jane Austen's other stories, widows are dependent then on their children and their children's spouses to house and feed and take care of them. So she's thinking about not only her future but her daughter's futures. It's coming across as vapid. And to continue what I was just saying, Mr. Bennet says, is that his design in settling here? Design? Nonsense, how can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes. And Mr. Bennett is poking at her, being like, is this his design? Because obviously this is your design that, I make this um introductions and then we can introduce the girls and then they can't marry. That he knows that she's plotting and scheming, but you kind of need a plot and scheme. But it's like, again, it goes into Mr. Bennett's slight cruelty that he sees what his wife is doing and he knows why she's doing it, but he pokes at her and makes fun of her for it, even though he understands that it's probably the smartest thing. But I think he just doesn't like the way that she goes about it, which is sad though, because like kind of at the same time, how else do you go about it? So I just like though that like he's saying, is that his design? Him saying, is that his design? Is that Simon? A very subtle way of him poking out, is that your design? Mr. Bennet then saying, I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or you may send them by themselves, which perhaps will still be better, for you are as handsome as any of them. Mr. Bingley might like you best of the party. And this perfectly encompasses Mr. Bennet's humor, where like he's teasing, but he gets to the truth of the situation. Like, this is what you really want. Like, why am I going through this whole song and dance of decorum if the end result is just that you want him to meet the girls, and he probably doesn't even want to meet me. He wants to probably meet the girls if that's to be the case. But him then saying, maybe he wants you, Mrs. Bennet. Maybe that's just send the girls on their own. Screw decorum. Like, it might as well pimp them out, is kind of what he's subtly saying, but it's going over her head because he's simultaneously poking at her vanity, because she once was a very beautiful girl, as she and Mr. Bennet both say later in the book, that the reason why Mr. Bennet married her was because she was very beautiful. And so he's saying that here too. And it's I love Mr. Bennet. I think he's hilarious. I find him so funny and very clever, but he's simultaneously cruel with his cleverness the more I look at it. So this chapter is not only setting up the inciting incident that there's a newcomer to town, which is typical in stories. Either you go somewhere or someone comes in and the story changes, the normal changes. But we also are seeing this kind of conversation around marriages of how it doesn't come across naturally, that there's a play being performed, and it's the same with decorum. Like, the decorum is an aspect of it, as Mrs. Bennet points out, that you but was it but my dear, you must indeed go and see Mr. Bingley when he comes into the neighborhood. Indeed you must go, for it will be impossible for us to visit him if you do not. Because of decorum, they can't go without him first and making the introduction and meeting him, and because men can kind of do it a little bit more freely than women, it's a mess. But there's these like confines that they're abiding by, but they're silly confines, as Mr. Bennet's kind of teasing. But that's what the story is then making fun of. Like, within this first chapter, it's setting up like everything comes around marriage, but also everything is around decorum and appearances. And we're going to see that come up time and time again throughout the rest of the story, how decorum is either stuck to or put aside, or when you decide to abide by and when you decide to not. Lizzie straddles that line. Lydia kind of likes to push the old decorum ways to the wayside. You have others like Charlotte Lucas, who strictly keeps the decorum. Miss Bingley likes to use decorum to show that she's better than others. And then appearances. The first impression, not only of Mr. Darcy and Miss Lizzie Bennet have of each other, but then, like, Mr. Wickham and all the others. So chapter 1 perfectly is summarizing, like giving us a snapshot of the entire book, not only setting up what the intention of the book is of marriage, but it's setting up these conversations that we're going to be having about marriage, about appearance, about decorum, and about all these dynamics going on in a very fun, engaging conversation between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. And the reason why Jane Austen is very easy to adapt is because there is a lot of dialogue. So we're not getting much scene here, but we're getting a lot of really brilliant dialogue that tells us a lot between these just two characters. We haven't even met the titular main couple yet. And I like that we're kind of starting with them, which is fascinating, because normally you would want to start with like your main focus character. I would critique that if I was editing it today, but we're not. But it's It's fascinating. I don't know how to describe it more than that. Oh, I also forgot that it's setting up the conversation about Sense and Sensibility too. Now, remember, Sense and Sensibility was published in 1811. Pride and Prejudice, even though it was written first by her, sat on the shelf until 1813 when it was published officially. And Sense and Sensibility, if you go to my video, I did like the history. I talked a little bit more about the concepts around Sense and Sensibility, and we see it here being introduced with Mrs. Bennet when she's saying, "My nerves, my dear," and he goes, "Your nerves are my oldest companion. I know about them," and her nerves are a characterization of sensibility, of over emotion. So this chapter is also introducing not only like obviously marriage, parents, decorum, but Sense and Sensibility too, like that, because we're going to see with a lot of these characters how they fall on either side of these lines. For example, the end of the chapter then also has like this conversation between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet where like she says, "You do not know what I suffer, but I hope you will get over it and live to see many young men of 4,000 a year to come into the neighborhood. It will be no use to us if 20 such should come, if 20 such should come, since you will not visit them. Depend upon it, my dear, that when there are 20, I will visit them all." And I wonder if like he's not willingly agreeing to meeting them and just being like, "Yeah, sure, fine, I'll meet this guy, whatever." The reason why he's kind of teasing Mrs. Bennet and drawing out this long form joke kind of thing is because his pride has been offended, which goes into the Pride and Prejudice, because Mr. Bennet is not extremely wealthy, as we see. Like, he's a landed gentry, but he's not 4,000 a year wealthy. And, you know, they got married because of the beauty, and maybe he had a little bit more wealth than she had, because you get the impression that, like, her and her family aren't that well off. But then now she wants better, she wants more. And I think that's kind of offending his pride of like, was I not good enough? Was I not wealthy enough? Would you have wished to have married a more wealthy man? Was this a conversation that maybe has passed between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet over the years? I've heard maybe bemoaning, "I should have married that guy because he had more money." But he just didn't give her the time of day because she had the lack of thereof money. So I never really thought of it to this moment that like you see the Pride and Prejudices being played with all the characters, including Mr. Bennet. I think his pride is being offended here, and this is why he is putting on this kind of joke with Mrs. Bennet of, "I'm not going to do this." But yeah, he does end up meeting Mr. Bingley, as he proclaims in a later chapter. You know what? This feels almost more like a play than like, say, like, it's fascinating because like Evelina is written in the letter format. A lot of these stories of the time are written in letter format. Sense and Sensibility was supposed to start as a letter format, like exchanging of letters. But this feels like a play, not only with the amount of dialogue, but then to have this paragraph: "Mr. Bennet was so odd at a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice, that the experience of 3 and 20 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. When she was discontented, she fancied herself nervous. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and news." And that paragraph feels like something you would see at the beginning of a new scene in a play, like a Shakespeare play. It's funny that it's coming at the end of this scene instead of the beginning, which makes it a little different. But that little concise description of the characters and setting of the scenes is usually what you see in plays. So it's hitting me now in this read through when I'm doing a close read, which is usually what happens whenever I do a close read and dissect. I uncover new ideas and opinions and angles of the stories, even though I've read this a million times. It's very much like a play, and she's setting it up like a play. And we do know that she does appreciate plays. She uses them in other of her stories and stuff, but it's funny that she's kind of setting this up almost as like a Shakespearean play, almost like a Midsummer's Night Dream. And yeah, this was chapter 1.